Hello, and thank you for joining us for this very special edition of On Brand as we take a look back at the year in review. I'm Cathy Boxall, I'm the Head of Brand Entertainment at the Story Lab, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Paul Wilson, Head of Strategy at Vizeum Global, and Dan Calladine, Head of Media Futures at Carat. So Paul's route into the industry was an unusual one. He started off studying zoology, but found his way into Vizeum in June of this year, bringing 15 years of strategy experience with him. During his career, Dan has worked for tech companies, consultancies, agencies, and for the last 10 years, he's been writing the trends report for Carat. Dan is also our resident influencer with an Instagram account which boasts 40,000 followers. So as 2019 draws to a close, we thought it'd be interesting to look back at the year and think about what worked, what surprised us, and what we're looking forward to in 2020. So to kick us off, what are some of the trends in advertising and marketing that you feel have really defined 2019, Dan?
I think one of the biggest trends is that we've seen the rise of what we call contextual commerce, so essentially selling through social channels, because this has been very popular within the Chinese media platforms like WeChat for several years, but it's only just in the West that we're starting to see this. We see now brands starting to sell things directly through Instagram, and what we heard very recently was that Facebook is going to be introducing a new method of payment which will presumably accelerate this, and then people will also be selling through WhatsApp as well. Then something else we've also seen is the rise, again really coming from China, the rise of selling within live video streams. So people making a video and then selling directly the things that they're talking about. So again, very popular in China, but we've seen Twitch do this with the Amazon Prime Day festival this year as well. So we've seen that, and then also I think we've seen quite a lot more contextual advertising and advertising less based on specific audiences, partly because of GDPR in Europe. Okay.
Great. And so what were some of the trends that were tipped to dominate this year but didn't really come to pass, and why was that?
Well, I think the one that we thought might be big that wasn't really so big was the rise of the idea of the digital detox. And I think possibly part of it is that a lot of people write about it in broadsheet newspapers, but it's actually quite hard to get the most avid technology users, the most avid social media users to put down their devices. So I think it's one of those things where there's a lot of noise about it, but actually it's quite hard to get people to participate in it because they enjoy using media so much.
Okay, and Paul, one for you. So one of the key themes that dominated Cannes Lion this year was the balance between data and creativity. So what are some of the best examples of how we can humanize data to reach consumers most effectively that you've seen?
The case study I really loved was called Road Stories. It was from Isobar in the Netherlands. What I really liked about it is it was for VW, and what they wanted to do is, it's something that every parent kind of sees, is they take their kids on a road trip and they get in the back of the car and they get their iPad out and they just look at their kind of iPad. And they wanted to get children to look out the window during the trip. And so what they did is they mapped all the roads in Netherlands, and they identified like key features, so like windmills, tunnels, and kind of other things. And then the really interesting bit is they married that to storytelling. So they created these stories, animated stories, which referenced those things that they mapped out the window. So when they drove past a windmill, the story would reference a windmill. And the way they created it was then all those chunks of stories were told in a different way depending on your different trip. So every time a windmill came, it would insert that into that kind of story. So multiple different narratives, storytelling, and really smart use of data.
Fantastic, love that innovative storytelling. And I suppose linked to that, so research is showing for the first time that some creative work is becoming less effective. So there's now quite a big opportunity for media agencies to match great creative work with real contextual knowledge to make it more effective. Can you speak to how Vizeum are really meeting that challenge?
Yeah, I don't know. I think context is becoming increasingly important. The amount of devices you have that you can reference context. And we're focusing on kind of understanding kind of context more, and even to the point where we're moving away from demographics, because that can limit your audience even more so. And with things like GDPR, we're finding that there's less kind of personal identified data, so we're relying more on kind of contextual data to understand that. And then marrying up those context with kind of messaging. So increasingly we are defining the context and messaging which is informing the creative kind of messaging. So clients are asking us to say, so what assets should we create? What messaging should we create? And by understanding that context, we can help kind of shape that and inform how that creative is flexing to those different areas.
Great. And a good one here. A key issue that the industry is finally waking up to is the importance of diversity, both in terms of the audiences that the brands represent in their advertising and bringing more diverse voices into the agencies that produce that work. So it might seem a bit obvious, but how can you explain why this is so important and how it can benefit both the brands, the agencies and their consumers?
So I think as an agency, we need to be as diverse as the world as far as possible. So our clients sell things to everybody, or try to sell things to everybody, or certainly vast amounts of the population. And we need to be as diverse as those groups of people so that we can understand what sort of messages will work best, what sort of ways of reaching these people will be most effective. And I think we can't do that unless, as an organisation, we have people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and sort of really try to recruit as widely as possible.
And for me, creativity, we're a creative industry, and creativity is about putting different things together to create something kind of new and different. So diversity is fundamental to that. And I think it's not just diversity in terms of kind of gender and ethnicity, but about how people kind of think. And from a global role, also understanding cultural differences as well. So I think, we understand the importance of diversity. I think the real challenge for us is how we deliver on that, and how we allow those different voices to be heard, and how we allow people to contribute. So how are we making sure we do that? And I think that's the day-to-day kind of struggle in terms of how we're delivering on those things. And it's a real challenge and focus for us.
And I suppose, Paul, you've spoken before about why traditional high street brands can't afford to play it safe on the high street. What can brands do to innovate and transform their physical bricks and mortar locations into more innovative and experiential spaces?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just wander around the high street and look at what stores are doing to try and attract people into their stores. And you realise a lot of the things they're doing are very, very similar. They're similar kind of messages, similar kind of approaches. And it's like, that's your biggest opportunity to get somebody to walk in and do something. The people who are doing it really well, I think the way to find that out is actually go shopping with a 7-year-old, because they just get drawn to the exciting, interesting stuff. They're not going to filter stuff, they don't. And if you look at the Lego store in kind of central London, it's an amazing experience. Yes, they have amazing kind of Lego constructions of, say, Big Ben and the House of Parliament. But the thing that really draws children kind of in is they have a minifigure kind of display where you can create customized minifigures. So you can create whatever head, whatever helmet or hat, whatever kind of body, whatever accessory, and you get a pack of 5 slots, and you can build your own little character. And this thing is a magnet for small children, and they're all making up their own figures. Their parents are kind of like helping them as well, so they're spending more time in the store. And even when you go to check out, you speak to the people who in the store, and they're fascinated by what different children have created, what figures they've created and how they've created. So it's this amazing experience which not only engages children, but it engages parents and it engages the staff there as well.
And I think stores can't compete on price these days. They can't be cheaper than you can buy online. So they need to add a physical element. You need to be able to try things on. You need to be able to really examine things and also talk to experts and stuff like that as well, as a point of differentiation and as a way of getting people to go into the store and not just look at things on their phones.
Yep. So Dan, a question for you. So 2019 has seen eSports break into the mainstream with major sports like golf and Formula One emulating their broadcast formats to reach a younger, more tech-savvy audience. Do you see the future of sports broadcasting as online, or do you think this is more of a flash in the pan?
No, I think it's definitely not a flash in the pan. I think it's definitely the way we're going to be going. I think more people will be choosing online streams to watch things on, maybe with different sorts of audio, different options for audio. I think the idea of showing things on gaming platforms like Twitch is also going to increase, and I think it's going to be really fascinating next year to see the Olympics and also the European Championships and see what sort of innovations come along there, what new ways of covering sports people invent, what new sorts of ways of reacting to things people invent as well.
I love that observation in terms of how we've seen a flip. So how sports have been influencing e-gaming in terms of the behaviours and codes.
Yeah, most e-games were either based on sports or based on films or based on genres of things. Yeah. And now it's going the other way around.
And the other way around. So in the same way as, in fashion, where we saw the Burberry store famously, it kind of, rather than, it reflected, the online environment in a lot of ways, making it much more interactive, making it much more kind of social and engaging. And now what we're seeing is those things, when you get to an inversion point, you start going, oh, there's these different codes, and it opens up a whole area of kind of creativity and inspiration.
Fantastic. And as we see the digital platforms and products transform the traditional advertising space, do you think the role of agencies is to react to those trends as they occur, or to shape them with the solutions that we offer?
I think it's a bit of each, really. So I think we need to have good ways of keeping our ear to the ground to work out what is bubbling up, what people are going to be doing, what early adopters are doing now, what more people are going to be doing soon, and then work out how we capitalise on that, how we work around those sorts of new behaviours. But I also think we need to be able to educate. So when things do become more mainstream, like podcasting, for example, to actually advise our clients on how best to use a new technology, examples of what's good, and to help them visualize how things would work. Esports as well is another great example of this. So I think it's a bit of each. I think, basically.
Okay, and then last question, looking ahead slightly, what trends do you expect to emerge in 2020 that you're most excited by?
I think there's some really interesting things happening around social media. There seems to almost be a spectrum of sharing completely privately within messaging groups, through to sharing with close friends, through to sharing more broadly. And I think we'll see people playing around with the different nuances of that. And I think we'll see brands trying to capitalize on that as well. I also think we'll see some really interesting new technologies, or we've already seen them, but we'll see them sort of gather more pace, and that's things like in-game advertising. It's also things like, there's a company that we know which is reinventing in-flight media, where essentially when people bring their own tablet onto a plane, they can now log into a network which will allow them to watch the most recent movies, and that's a really interesting new ad-supported environment. And then also I think it's really fascinating how video is becoming a lot more interactive. It's almost like video is giving people the control to make decisions about the direction the story is going. A bit like Bandersnatch, which I think is which was launched in very late December last year. But also there's other examples of that we've seen where you can actually make choices and the video becomes much more playable, much more immersive, much more lean forward than lean back. And I think we'll see lots of people sort of experimenting with those sorts of technologies, and also that as an ad format.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I'm really excited about, is video and the increased formats and what people are doing with those formats, because people are telling stories in kind of different ways, and I think people are only just starting with that kind of experimentation. So it'll be really interesting to see what people are doing with both super short form and longer form kind of content, and this more interactivity. Mm-hmm. And when you start sticking like data layers over video, where does that kind of take you? So that's really kind of interesting. And I suppose the other thing I'm interested in is beyond the kind of 2020 trends, what are those bigger, longer term, kind of slow moving trends, but probably more profound in their impact. So increased urbanisation, more people moving to cities. What does that mean in terms of infrastructure, in terms of how you're communicating with people? And broadly, kind of infrastructure changes. So, those are the things that have profound impact. So 5G, increased kind of transportation. So, how people are using transport. And then other trends like, demographics. We're going in Western Europe, you're seeing an aging population. What's the impact of that? And how is technology helping solve those kind of emerging problems in that kind of area? So those slightly less headline trends, but probably more profound in their kind of impact.
Great, thank you. That's that from us. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you, Paul and Dan. Don't forget to keep an eye out on the Carat social feeds for the 2020 Trends Report. Have a great break, and we will see you in 2020.